What's good, my man of society? It is your host with the most channel. Look back at you with another video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. That is how you my channel get into the algorithm. Highly appreciate if you go ahead and do that. Now, what I want to discuss, one of my subscribers had asked me if what are my thoughts on the Amen in La Tira fiasco that's going on, right? The scandal. Apparently, his channel or his name was slandered by, TMZ and whatnot, right? Now, he's an individual who's pretty popular on TikTok, right? He's an individual who changed his life around, right? He's somebody who had been in and out of incarceration, belonged to the streets, but, completely changed his life around and is trying to do good things, he's ill with cancer and everything like that, right? So he's an individual that, is trying to do better, he's trying to, do what's right and whatnot, right? And he's been covering the Emmanuel case, right? The missing child, right? Out of Southern California. And apparently, TMZ had hit him with a cease and, dismiss order because of his coverage of the Emmanuel Haro case, right? Apparently, he was there live when the law enforcement had the father of the child there, and he had mistakenly reported that they had found the body, which wasn't true. I remember seeing his live, and I was seeing it live right when he was talking about it, how he was saying that they did find the body, but they didn't. Later on, he corrected himself, right? But TMZ didn't highlight that point, right? Try to, I guess, slander his character, slander him, right, as an amateur journalist and all of that, right? And one of my thoughts, right, is TMZ jealous because they wanted to break the story, or is he in the wrong or who's in the right? Here's my opinion. Keep in mind, these are just my opinions. This is just my thoughts, right? I'm not here to, slander nobody or nothing like that. When it comes to journalism, actually being a real journalist and reporting, it is something that's very difficult and very sensitive, right? When it comes to actually coming with the actual details and not coming with, opinions or alternative facts, as people call them, right? But it's important to do your homework when it comes to this kind of stuff, especially a sensitive case like a missing child whose parents are, suspicious and all of that, right? So a lot of emotions are running high, right? When a child is missing, that's as sensitive as a subject that you can get, right? So reporting on misinformation and stuff like that is very, 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 it's going to raise a lot of alarms. It's going to set a lot of people off. A lot of people are going to be very upset, right? Because when you do that, it tends to, it could, lead to investigators now, having to worry about debunking the rumors and instead of, focusing on real matters now, it sends them on a wild goose chase, or it tends to, get people to start spreading false information, right? And it could lead to, hurting the case when we're talking about dealing with, this child. So that's why it's important to really know and do your homework before you report on something. But nowadays and age, right, what tends to happen is a lot of people want to be the first ones to break the story. I'm not saying that in his case, right? Because I don't believe that he did it with any, ill will or that he was doing it just because he wanted to be the one that broke the story, right? But most people tend to do that, right? And, people are going to judge you based off of your past and your appearance when it comes to, like, let's say, the world, right? That's just how the world gets down, right? So, knowing that, we should be a little bit more careful in what we say, because these individuals are going to look for any little thing in why to slander or, try to poke holes into your credibility. You get what I mean? So we have, that against us as it is, right? And we have to recognize that, in order to, grow and prosper, in things like this. Because expecting TMZ to come at us like how we would go at somebody, like if we were to, have issues with somebody and we go up to them and handle it one-on-one or have a conversation with them instead of, having to do all this bullshit. It's to think that that's the way the world works, or people are going to do it like how we would handle it is not realistic in general, as it is, right? Because these people didn't grow up like me and you, so they don't work like how we handle stuff, right? these are companies, and that handle stuff different, right? They send letters and handle everything through legal matters, and do everything by the books, and stuff like that. And I get what people are saying. Well, why should they be worried about somebody as small as this, or somebody, But in all true reality, he has a big fan base, right? He has a big enough following where they seen it as a concern to be spreading false information to that many people. So it's not like he's somebody that's just irrelevant. No, he's relevant, in the sense of that, right? Where they feel the need to do this just because they, maybe emotions are running high. I don't think that TMZ did it because they wanted to be the ones that broke the story, and I don't feel like he did it because I don't feel like he was rushing to conclusions because he wanted to do that either, right? I feel like the ones that defend him is because he's raza and he's just like us, and they want to be, supporting him because of this, right? And I feel like the ones that attack him, right, and defend for TMZ is just because of, his background, and, they're just judging him, based off of who he is, that they think that he's doing it just because of money and yada, 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 right? I don't feel like, both sides' intentions have any, ill will to them, right? Or that they were looking to do it for the wrong reasons, right? But like I said, with journalism, you really gotta, make sure and do your homework and know what before you report on something as, factual, especially something as sensitive as a topic like this. You get what I'm saying? So I feel like, both parties, were caught in their feelings, and, both parties were, assuming the worst out of each other, right? And I get it. He did correct himself after, and apologize and everything, and TMZ didn't report on that, right? But I think, like I said, they were just in their feelings at the moment when they reacted, right? Just like and it's never good to react out of emotions when you're emotional, right? You gotta let yourself calm down and chill, and then speak your mind, right? Because when you're in your feelings, obviously you're gonna tend to say stuff, based off of anger, aggression, or whatever, right? But you're not going to be level-headed, like clear-minded when you speak. So that's why it's never good to speak when you're, in your feelings. But the way I see it is that, yeah, it was an error, right? I don't feel like he did it intentionally, right? And by them calling him an amateur, I don't feel like they were really trying to like discredit him like that, right? It's just that well, he doesn't belong to like no, whatever he's reporting, but I feel like maybe that's why, right? Because he's a reporter or a journalist from where? Like who does he work for? Oh, well, he's just does it for TikTok or whatever. So it would literally be considered an amateur, though. Not in a sense to like try to bring down their credibility and stuff like that, but like in the sense of like, well, they don't work for a company and stuff like that, right? And they're just someone that grew, and decided to do this on social media, right? I feel like maybe in the sense that's why, because then people were gonna wonder, well, what does this guy work for that they're homing in on? CBS, NBC? Yeah, get what I'm saying? I mean, they could have just said TikToker or YouTuber or whatever, but then but then if it would have had those labels on it, people would have probably been like, oh, he's just one of these TikTokers that think he knows everything, or a YouTuber. You get what I'm saying? So, maybe that has some factors to do with it, right? It's, who knows, right? Only they truly know, right? But to assume the worst también is rushing to conclusions. And like I said, these are just assumptions and opinions, and assumptions are not facts, right? So we can't try to spread them like they are facts. You get what I mean? But overall, I could see why they were upset, right? Because of the whole situation with the child, and he's saying that they found the body when they haven't, right? And then a lot of people now, you got to think of his viewers now spreading that information and spreading that false information, and it getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So you can see why they seen it as a threat, or as a like a mistake. And that's what it is. Journalism. See, that's why journalism is important. Why people go to school. Why people actually have to go by companies and by the book and rules that they have set in motion, right? Because it keeps them on check from reporting misinformation, because that tends to then harm the business, and it tends to affect cases and the communities. When you don't have set rules in place, or or morals and stuff like that. Like I said, I don't feel like he was doing any ill, like he was doing it for the wrong reasons. Like he's just in it for the money. I don't feel like that. I feel like the individual is trying to do good for his community and trying to do right because of all his past mistakes, right? But the world's gonna judge you by your past as it is. Um, and that's messed up. They don't have the right to do that either, and it's never good to judge a book by its cover. I always say that. But that's the reason why we have to be more on our toes than others, right? That's why we have to make sure that we don't report misinformation or speak without having the facts, right? Because they're gonna try to use everything against us, right? So we just got to move extra cautious because for those reasons. But overall, that's just my opinions. That's just my thoughts on the matter. And like I said, these are just my opinions, so I'm not here to try to pick sides. I'm just calling it for how I see it. But what are your thoughts? Leave it in the comments. Shadow, we up.